Hello, I'm Leonard Nimoy. The year 1951 held a lot of surprises for most Americans. For the first time, atomic energy was used to generate electric power. It was also a year when housewives flocked to this new thing called Tupperware parties. Also in 1951, Marlon Brando's smoldering performance in Streetcar Named Desire mesmerized movie audiences. In the Rose Bowl this year, California lost to Michigan. And for you stargazers, scientists finally mapped the structure of our Milky Way. Back on Earth, hot dogs were selling for a paltry 15 cents. So now we move on to the 1951 episode of Our 20th Century.
Guns on the Korean front sound the keynote and echo the stalemate around the world in 1951. More than 1 million red casualties and 100,000 allied marked the second year of conflict, which saw General MacArthur relieved of his post as Commander-in-Chief of the Far East, raising a storm of controversy over the nation. He was succeeded by General Matthew B. Ridgway, who undertook the difficult task of facing the hordes of Chinese Reds. America was stunned by reports of the mass murders of 5,500 of their own war prisoners, slaughtered in cold blood behind communist lines. Stalemate was again the word for truce negotiations after more than 150 sessions between United Nations top-level officers and their red opposite numbers. The only conclusion reached definitely in the tent at Panmunjom with the communist representatives was the establishment of a buffer zone 2.5 miles wide, extending along the present battle zone above the 38th parallel. It was the entering wedge in the deadlock which has marked the Korean struggle since the United Nations undertook its police action in the Far East. The Near East became another world trouble spot with the nationalization and seizure of the world's largest oil refinery in Abadan in Iran. A fifth of the world's oil supply was cut off, and nationalist feeling ran high against Britain and the Western democracies. Attempts to arbitrate the differences made by America's Averell Harriman failed to solve the Anglo-Iranian dispute. Egypt also was caught up in the conflict with a demand of Britain's ouster from the Suez and Sudan. Premier Mossadegh, spearhead of the oil nationalization program, took his case to the United Nations, where he remained adamant in his stand and raised the specter of possible Russian intervention and acquisition of the huge oil reserves. It was but one of the difficult questions that faced the United Nations in a year of stalemate between the free nations and those of the Iron Curtain. One of the greatest peacetime spy dramas in the nation's history reaches its climax as Julius Rosenberg and Morton Sobel, convicted of revealing atomic secrets to the Russians, enter the federal building in New York to hear their doom. Another of the spy ring, Mrs. Ethel Rosenberg, who with her husband was convicted of actually transmitting the secrets to Russia through Soviet diplomatic channels. The ring was first uncovered following the arrest of Klaus Fuchs in England. David Greenglass, Mrs. Rosenberg's brother, confessed theft of the secrets while stationed at the Los Alamos atomic project. He later became the government's chief witness in the prosecution of Sobel and the Rosenbergs. It is a stern jurist they face in Judge Irving Kaufman. After administering a tongue lashing in which he charged them with the indirect death of thousands of men in Korea, he sentenced both Rosenbergs to death in the electric chair and Sobel to 30 years in prison. At the time these pictures were made, Greenglass still had to hear his fate. It is the first time in peacetime that such a death penalty has been handed down. And while appeals to the highest courts are planned, it certainly appears that the spies are headed along a one-way street. The Senatorial Crime Investigation Committee shifts to New York, and Frank Costello, alleged overlord of gambling, arrives at the big town's federal building on Foley Square. Before the packed committee room, the star witness, Frank Costello, arrives for what proves to be many hours of close questioning by the committee, a committee which is particularly anxious to know the extent of Costello's wealth. Here is one specific question put to him concerning the assets he kept in cash in his strongbox in his home.
Do you have $100,000 in cash in that strongbox?
I said I would not know.
Now, the chair feels it's necessary to advise the witness that any statement he makes is being made under oath and subjects him to a charge of perjury. And the committee does not feel that the witness is, at this juncture, and we're passing on other testimony at this time, answering the questions truthfully.
As the committee members probe diligently, Costello goes into frequent huddles with his attorney, George Wolfe. Even a note of glamour is injected into the thrill-packed proceedings by the presence of Virginia Hill, in whose home the late Bugsy Siegel was killed. She denies any Costello connection.
Did you ever get any money from Costello?
No.
And did you ever get any money from Meyer Lansky?
I never got money from any of those fellas.
None of those
None
fellas?
of those fellas. None of these that I've been reading about, or none that I knew. They never gave me anything.
None of the Fichettes?
No.
You
I
did-
don't even speak to the... I mean, I met that Charlie once or twice. I don't even talk to him.
You don't like him?
No.
30,000 fight fans are out in Berlin to see Gerhard Hecht, the German light heavyweight champion, clash in a non-title bout with the visiting world middleweight champ, Sugar Ray Robinson of New York. At ringside is Mrs. Robinson and Sugar Ray's sister, and they see a lot more than just another fight. Winner of 126 pro bouts with only one defeat, Robinson quickly displays his mastery over the German. The referee starts the count, but stops when Hecht's handlers charge their boy had been floored by a kidney punch. The ref also grants the fallen idol of Berlin a 1-minute respite for medical examination. Apparently still smarting over the pasting Joe Louis gave Max Schmeling years ago, the fans are boiling at this point, and Hecht keeps them boiling with dramatic effect. Meanwhile, Robinson waits patiently in his corner for the verdict that his opponent is physically okay, and the fight goes on. For 10 seconds it goes on. Again, Hecht turns as Robbie bores in, and down he goes, clutching at his back. Again, his handlers scream foul. The fans take up the chant of protest, and the referee disqualifies Robinson, a blot on a fine record. On top of that, he has to duck a barrage of bottles and other missiles thrown into the ring. 6 hours later, the West Berlin Boxing Commission set aside the disqualification verdict, ruling it a no-decision fight. But right now, a thoroughly pulverized Gerhard Hecht is dragged to his corner, and an angry mob, incited, some say, by communist troublemakers, heaps both abuse and bottles on Sugar Ray Robinson. Led to safety by 20 Berlin policemen, Robbie escapes without injury, his outstanding fight record unblemished.